everybody. We'd love for you to come take a seat. If you are here for us today, we have a panel that I think you're going to find very engaging. I'm really excited to be here, and we're glad you're here. When we started Sunday services 2 years ago, we started it with the idea that we would have literally just services on Sunday for those who were going to South by. And we did some panels in the afternoon, and we found them so engaging, so well attended, that we realized that there was a lag in the conversation about life. And so while we were talking about business and we were talking about tech and film and movies and music and everything else, oftentimes it was a disconnect from what real life was about. And so today we're going to take an opportunity to do that. I'm going to introduce you to Tony and Karen in just a second. But the title of this is Faith, Family, and Fast Cars. We're actually going to look at several different things. We could spend as much time as you want on the fast car piece of it, but we kind of are leaning towards the first two. And as we do so, we're going to begin to talk about that. For those of you who are fans of Severance and have been watching it, you know that there's a national conversation about life as opposed to work. Are they totally separate, or are they something that integrate? And anybody who works in the HR field knows that they have to be integrated. You just have to integrate them in order to make that happen. So we're talking to two people who have thought a lot about that. Tony and Karen are friends of mine, but they also are people that I've admired from afar for a long time. We're going to hear more about Karen. I'm not going to give you their bio until we get into it a little bit, but you'll begin to hear about them. And so thank you for being here. We're looking forward to this conversation. Hi, guys.
Hi, Larry. Good morning.
Hi.
It's good to see you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit. We're going to start with just where you guys met. Tell us about your first date. How did it come about? How about that?
You want to start?
Do
Karen.
you remember?
Karen
I
asked me
remember.
out.
Yeah. Okay. She asked you out. Yeah.
Yes, she did.
Okay. Tell me about that.
So we met. I was a summer intern at Merck. Tony was there as a full-time employee.
Ah.
We just so happened to be working in the same department. Tony had just replaced an individual who had been fired for sexual harassment. And our mutual boss at that time, a gentleman by the name of John Fitzgerald, pulled Tony aside the very first day that I started, and he said, look, keep your hands off the summer intern. I don't want a repeat of what we just went through.
Yeah.
And
You're triggering me.
And 3 days later, we were having dinner at the top of Windows of the World.
Oh my goodness.
That was our
No
first.
hands.
Yeah.
That was our first date. And John Fitzgerald at our wedding reception took all kinds of credit for bringing Tony and I together.
Of course he did, by saying no.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So do you want to correct anything she just said? Is that
No, I agree.
okay. So was it love at first sight?
It was definitely love at first sight. I was visiting a friend I was going to have lunch with, who is the assistant manager for HR, and I saw Karen from a distance, and I said, who's that beautiful woman inside talking to Angela, which is our HR manager? And she said, oh, it's some dingbuzz from Penn State. Well, I said, we are Penn State. So immediately, and she said, you know, she's going to be working in your department. And apparently, she's going to be working with you as well. So that was the end of that.
That's good.
I knew where I was headed.
So obviously the date went well. Tell us when you were married and where were you?
We were married in 1986.
Okay.
Penargil, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Very small town of about 3,000 people in the Northeast, between the Poconos and Allentown.
Gotcha.
We had our wedding at St. Peter's Lutheran Church. We had our wedding reception at the Hotel Bethlehem.
Ah.
We actually just went back to Hotel Bethlehem a couple of months ago. We spend the fall in State College, and we decided we were going to take a trip and go back to Hotel Bethlehem, and we pulled up to Hotel Bethlehem, and I'm like, I remember this thing being a lot bigger than what it is right now.
Yeah.
And we went inside to the ballroom, right, to the place that we had our wedding reception, which also appeared to be a lot smaller
Yeah.
than what it was then. So, yeah, 38 years.
Wow,
that
38
right?
years. Now,
Right.
just because I know you, there's some cross-cultural stuff that you guys negotiated as you got married, as you brought this into it. You know, you were Catholic, you were Protestant, out of a Lutheran background. You were Asian American. You're from originally
Philippines.
the Philippines.
Philippines, yeah.
Right, and then you obviously grew up here in the United States, from small town, large city, you know, corporate world. You came in. So we'll come back to all that, but that really set a stage for so much of it. Tell us briefly, Karen, just walk us through your work from college until you got to Dell and what you did at Dell. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, like I said, raised in Pennsylvania, went to Penn State.
We are.
We are. We started at Merck, and as a summer intern, and then ultimately working there full time. So followed Tony because he was there at Merck. Spent about 12 years at Merck in supply chain marketing, ran one of their manufacturing operations in Wilson, North Carolina. So we moved from New Jersey to Wilson. Right when we moved to Wilson, Tony got an amazing job at Citibank. And, you know, candidly, we lived apart Monday through Friday. Our son Alex was only a couple years old at that time.
Gotcha.
And after about 2 years of that, we decided we gotta simplify this thing. Tony was leaving every Sunday, coming home on a Friday. I was working 7 by 24, running a manufacturing operation. I followed him to Citibank. Was at Citi for about 3 years, and pretty much convinced after the first 6 hours of being at Citibank that I was leaving Citibank. It was not a very good place for me. And then eventually got a telephone call from an executive recruiter at Dell who said, you should come and talk to Dell. I said, great company, not moving my family to Texas. They said, Austin is not Texas. And we said, we'll come for 2 years. And we've been here for 25 years. So I pretty much did every job, I think, at Dell. Ran their supply chain, ran their customer technical support, sales centers for a period of time in North America. Ran pretty much every part of marketing. And then I got a nod one day, a telephone call from Michael Dell to be their chief marketing officer. Did that for about 6 years. And then when Dell and EMC came together, Michael asked me to start the first chief customer officer organization.
So that was a big merger for you guys.
It was a huge merger,
Yeah.
the largest technology merger.
And you had to negotiate all that change that was in there.
Negotiate all that change, bring cultures together, keep people focused on the customer instead of getting focused on their kind of individual functional silo. Be the truth teller
Yeah.
on what customers were really irritated about and how do we, you know, fix and address it. Which, by the way, I have some of my team members that were a big part of that
Yeah.
are here, and it was not an easy journey, but we had a lot of fun.
Wow. And Tony, so at some point in the journey, just to fast forward a little bit, you had to make the decision to leave industry and to go be at home. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, correct. So as we moved to Austin, Texas, we had a 6-month-old baby, Carmela Quintos, who is sitting Cinderella now.
I love Carmela.
Was sitting right in front here, and she was a tiny little baby, and Karen said one of us need to keep an eye on her. We can't funnel her out on a $300 a week program somewhere. I don't trust them because we moved here for Dell. What do you think? Well, you know what I think, right? So 2 weeks later, I found myself rocking the cradle, basically, with my right foot, and I was basically raising Carmela then. I decided to leave.
And Alex, don't forget about Alex.
Oh, yeah.
Alex was easy. I just had to tie him in one corner, give him a little pizza, and he was good to go. That one was a lot more work than I anticipated. So what I thought of like leading this group of people of like maybe 300 of them running global relocation for Citibank was hard. There was nothing more important and harder than being a mom. And there's no regret, sweetie. I will tell you right now, every day, there's not a day in my life that I think about you and I spending time together. So the only reason I felt bad doing that was because I see my wife at 6 a.m. in the morning in her Grand Cherokee heading up the hill, you know, to Dell and plowing the field for 12 hours. That was the hardest thing. Because it was a sort of a role reversal, and it was very difficult for many people, people that I knew well, including my in-laws, that did not understand why we did that. But there was something bigger than anything else, than just leaving your job at Citibank.
Right.
God had made the calling, and as you can see, several years later, she graduated from Vanderbilt University, found a great husband from Vanderbilt, and so I didn't do too bad. You know what I mean?
But obviously, it's a hard decision to make that decision. You go back into the workplace, was there any bias against a non-traditional marriage in terms of you staying home? And how did that work?
You know, I'll say Tony's very uniquely wired, and he put up with a lot of stuff. So when I moved into the C-suite role, and Michael Dell would take his leadership team away to his place in Kona, I mean, I was the only woman that was there for a period of time on the leadership team, and Tony was the only man that was part of these spousal programs that they would hold.
Yeah.
And candidly, they wouldn't be doing things that he wanted to do, right? It was things like cooking classes and flower arranging, and
Yeah.
he's like, just
Yeah.
put me in front of a Lamborghini or Porsche or something like that,
Yeah.
and I'll be fine. So I give him a ton of credit in navigating through it, and I would say, Larry, that I don't know that I felt so much in corporate America around kind of that bias, but there's still a lot of bias and societal pressures that happen in the community. Some of the meanest things I think that were said by stay-at-home moms.
Yeah.
Around
Well, you mentioned family too. You're just trying to negotiate that.
Yep, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. My parents are super accepting of kind of my career and all of that, but they'd be like, what am I going to tell my friends? Right? You know, you're working, he's staying at home. How do you navigate through kind of just the challenges of that? And I actually believe this is going to be one of the single biggest challenges that corporate America and the business world is going to have to face going forward. Because in my generation, most women decided to stay home.
Right.
In our case, Tony did. But, look, our daughter and son-in-law.
I dare say
and
everybody in this crowd is
everybody in this
facing
crowd,
that.
they're like, you know what, I want to keep working.
Right.
Maybe they don't want to work 80 hours a week, and maybe they don't want to eventually ascend to a senior level position, but they're not just going to stay at home
Yeah.
and raise their kids. And I think the business world really needs to step up and kind of understand that there's a different dynamic today around how dual working couples are thinking about it. I think it's better that there are more dads that are staying at home, but I still think there's a natural bias that still exists in the community around, the stereotypes.
Yeah. So you've been married 38 years, so you've obviously negotiated it well up until this point. And so, as a part of that, tell us how do you keep a marriage strong when one's going off and, like you said, tilling the fields for 12 hours, and the other is staying home, and you have that role reversal? What are some of the keys that might be insightful for these folks?
Simple rule.
What?
Happy wife, happy life. Happy husband, suspicious wife. So,
Yeah.
there's, it's a very simple rule that we followed basically. Yes, we do have a once a month kind of irked that brings you to the 6-month deal, and then in 6 months you have your twice a year blow up. That's okay.
Yeah.
Because it gets things out in the open. But the one thing that we decided earlier on is that unless it's really totally relevant, we're not going to fight it out and duke it out. Our pastor was pretty good too. He said to us, no matter how angry you are with your spouse, when you're laying in bed, hold hands and say a prayer together before you go to bed. Never go to bed angry. It's probably a good rule. And Pastor Wolf, he's very right. He taught us that from the very beginning, and it's part of our marriage counseling. Our kids kept us together, honestly. Whether it's a biological child or a adopted child, it kept us and kept the bond together. We forgave each other. That's one thing. A hard thing to do is forgiving. And sometimes you're so mad, I'm not going to lose this one on him or her. You have to. You're going to have to. And that's okay. In my case, I like to let things roll off my back, drive a fast car, and that's the end of it. Be home for dinner. So,
Karen, anything to add to that?
I would say just kind of reflecting on the last 38 years, there's, and you reinforced it. By the way, Larry married Carmela and Oliver in the backyard of our house in Park City on August 3rd.
Wonderful.
And there's a lot of what you talked about that day that I certainly still think about, and we do. When you stand at the altar and you make a commitment to God, you make a commitment to each other.
Yeah.
And that was always at the foundation and the forefront of not giving up. Understanding where the boundaries are and those guardrails. And if you flip over those guardrails, to Tony's point, there's forgiveness or not. But there's this just constant commitment to each other, to working things out. I'm a huge believer in therapy.
Yeah.
So we've been to therapy.
Yeah.
It's kind of a spa for your soul. We have this amazing woman, her name is Elaine, and you go and see her and you walk out of there and honestly you feel like you just had like 3 hours of a facial and a massage, and she makes you feel really normal because you're just kind of talking through things that others have struggled with. So
the rhythms of forgiveness, of openness, having a place where you come alongside and you have somebody walking with you in that. All those things are things that carried you through what could have been a very stressful time because you were out there going fast. Is that a pretty good way to describe it?
Yeah, it's hard not to work at Dell without going fast.
Yeah. Right.
all of the time, and it's we would FaceTimes even like sitting around the dinner table and things like that. It's hard when you work at a company like Dell to not bring Dell into your house.
Yeah.
And the family dinner table and
Right.
Those types of things. Our son Alex would constantly remind me that he doesn't work for me, and he's like, don't go imposing this kind of Dell operating review thing here at the Quintos house and family.
Right.
But it's I would have never gotten to where I was at Dell if it hadn't been the support of Tony.
And I think that's a critical piece because oftentimes people see marriage as tangential to work, but in your case, it was foundational for that.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Good.
Huge.
Tell me
huge.
one thing very quickly because we need to change subjects, but something you love and respect about each other.
even though there's a significant difference between culturally what she was accustomed to and raised to. For example, she likes to cook with wine and some fine herbs. I only cook with soy sauce. The one thing that I love about Karen is that no matter how big her job got, I would say that she always came home and it was family first. She never missed a meeting. There's actually a lady sitting here that made sure she got home on time, canceled everybody else, lied to her teeth on why Karen's gone, and that's what we do. She came home every single time, didn't miss a run, didn't miss Alex kicking the ball, on the football field and missing it, you know. So it was family first.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I love about her.
Yeah.
Her devotion as a mother, as a wife, and of course to God was always first.
Yeah.
And the one last thing I love about her is she's very giving. She taught me how to tithe. It's not about keeping everything in your pocket and fattening it up. It has a lot to do with sharing it, and it's okay to enjoy watching other people prosper from what you have. So
And you guys have really taken that into your life in the way that you give and invest yourself in a lot of nonprofits around. We haven't had time to kind of list all the things that you all are involved in, but it's pretty remarkable. So can we pivot a little bit and just talk about work in particular? And Karen, Dale, you saw it grow over time. I don't know how big it was when you came in. Do you have any idea how many employees you had when you came in and how many when you left?
Company was 30 billion when I joined, and when I left, 100 billion, 120 billion dollars.
Yeah, so dramatic growth, and things are changing every 18 months. You're having to be the customer person out there to interface with them and then go talk to engineers, which got to be its own level of a challenge, if you will. But so when you're in that, is there something about you brought into that context that you thought about? Well, give us a glimpse under the hood. Tell us something that was a challenge that would inherit to a growing company, just for you.
I think one of the biggest challenges when I moved into the chief marketing officer role is Dell was at this really interesting time trying to figure out kind of their reason for being. So if Dell went away, what would stop happening? And I remember sitting in these exploratory discussions with the senior leadership team with help from an outside marketing agency, and we were trying to discover kind of what was our purpose? And I had colleagues of mine that were like, I'll tell you what our purpose is. Our purpose is to get the price of the stock up to, $100 a share. I'm like, that's not our purpose. Purpose is something that you feel in your heart. And the reason that employees want to get up in the morning and do the job that they're doing. And I'll never forget Michael standing up, and I said to Michael, what were you thinking when you started the company? And he paused, and he said that technology is all about unlocking human potential. I'm like, there it is.
There's your purpose.
There's your purpose.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did, we focused a lot on from a marketing organization is how do you get all 100,000 employees to see that connection of their job to our purpose, to the impact that they can have. And that was a challenge, right? Because those were early days of community work that we would do in all of the communities that we would serve and enabling that across 180 markets at Dell. Again, getting them to kind of connect the dots between their job, the impact of technology can have in the lives of the customers that they're serving. Getting employees to really think about the customer. Most organizations are organized in functional silos. And that is the antithesis of how customers want to do business with you. They don't want to do business with the finance person or the HR person. They want to do business with a company that is thinking about their needs. And that was probably the biggest cultural shift that we needed to do at Dell, was getting people to think customer end to end. How do you help customers kind of through their journey versus just thinking about, I'm a finance person, HR person, salesperson, et cetera.
Is this something you learned as the company grew, or is this something you inherently have as a gifting?
I don't know. Probably both. Probably both. When I when I got the nod, when I got the telephone call from Michael, I was in India when he offered me the chief marketing officer job, and my boss at that time, Paul Bell, had pulled me aside and said, "Michael's going to call you. He wants you to take this CMO job."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "I don't want it." And he's like, "What do you mean you don't want it?" And I'm like, "I don't want it. I love what I'm doing. I love working with you, Paul. I was doing public marketing, serving higher ed, state and local government, healthcare kind of customers." Anyhow, Paul sat there for about an hour trying to convince me. I said, "I'm going to go up to my hotel room and I'm going to call Tony," and because he's arguably been my biggest counsel and mentor and that type of thing. I think it was probably 2 a.m. when I called you back home, and I said to him.
And you picked it up?
He picked it up. He said,
I did.
Good.
I said, "Hey, bud," that's what I call him. I said, "Hey, Michael's going to call me, and he wants me to take the chief marketing officer role, and I don't want to do it." And he literally said to me, "Are you the most stupid person in the entire world?"
It was 2 in the morning.
It was 2 in the morning. He used an F word kind of before
Yeah,
that.
right, I
but
understand.
Said, he said, "You have an opportunity to work for the most iconic leader in technology. Why wouldn't you do it?"
Yeah.
With that, my cell phone went off, and I didn't recognize the number, so I hit ignore. Just so happened to be Michael. He called me back 30 seconds later, and he said to me, "How does it feel to be Dell's chief marketing officer?" And I said to him, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Like, why me? You have so many other leaders that could do this job." And he said, it's simple. He goes, "I love the work that you're doing in the public sector. You have the ability to just get stuff done at Dell. And thirdly, to your question, you are the most customer-centric executive that we have at Dell, bar none."
Yeah.
So I think
It's
it's a
part of your
combination
character,
of
yeah,
gift
yeah,
and
yeah.
journey.
So you just mentioned how, immediately you called Tony before you even talked to Michael, and that guided you. And part of that's that intersection between all of our life. We're not just a worker bee, but instead we have this life that's there. As a part of that, your faith has been a big part of your life as well. Tell me how your faith fits in with these discussions that you've had. Is there some way that it particularly informed your decisions along those lines?
I think so. And I think Tony, I mean, we talk about this a lot because, he does the fast car thing, by the way, is the fact that I call Tony a high-end car dealer. He corrected me last night and said he's not a dealer, he's a collector. And I didn't actually understand the difference because...
So can I just tell an anecdote?
Yeah.
I'm at the wedding last summer, and I'm sitting down, and we're all sitting after the wedding, and the person's sitting next to me, and I say, "Tell me about your relationship with the Quintos. How do you come to be here?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm Tony's Porsche dealer." And I thought, of course you are. That's exactly what it would be. Yeah. So
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you, God.
No, and we talk about this a lot because that industry is not necessarily known for its high ethics,
Right.
values, kind of character. The tech sector can be pretty brutal at times too. And, you can talk about how you did it with, your dealership and your cars and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think at work, it really was about how you show up. It really is about these God gifts that you are given, and all the things that you're taught around authenticity and servant leadership and humility and giving back and purpose-driven. All of those things were how I was raised, I was raised in the church, and what I've learned and things like that through the years. And I fundamentally believe that corporate America and the business world needs to be bringing much more of that spiritual thinking to bear in the corporate world. So I tried to do it through how you treat people, how you think about helping the underserved. As I got more and more senior in the organization, it was I thought my God-given responsibility to stand up for women, development of women, getting more women in senior leadership type of positions. So that's kind of how I thought
Yeah.
about bringing
I
my
love
faith
that
to work.
because as we live that out, those become Jesus principles for us, you know, in terms of leadership in that. Tony, we haven't talked to you about that, but your work then pivoted once she took on this role and you became a real estate investor and entrepreneur. Cars obviously are important to you, and I loved walking through your car collection the other day, and I realized it's not just about fast cars, it's about beauty. And watching that as we think about the art and other things like that. Tell me how your faith has impacted you in that work as well.
Well, there are a number of things, Larry, that you think about every day when you wake up in the morning and you feel good about yourself, and you feel blessed. You look at your 3 kids and a son-in-law now that's healthy and have the same beliefs and carries the same understanding that we both do. We feel very fortunate, you know. That is faith. Without faith, there won't be a good family. Without faith, you won't have good friends. And maybe not even fast cars, you know. So it's a number of those different things that you do every day. The key to this whole thing, Larry, that I really learned from many people among my friends is that how do you touch someone that very morning or that before the day ends that you say, I've done something good, that you really feel good about your day. It's not just a matter of praying that your day will go well, but it's actually praying that you touch someone that you feel good about. You help somebody. That's why it's good to, once in a while, shut the radio off in your car as you're driving and look around you. Look at the bridges that we have and look who lives among them. It's getting harder and harder every day. So what do you do to make them feel better? I think that's more important than just actually writing a check. You know, many of you are volunteers and sharing your time and your talent. That's very important. That's very important when you do some work with Research Global or somebody else that, you know, may need you that day. Just that one little good thing that you can do that can change someone's life forever. So that's how I take it every day.
Yeah, thank you. Well, both of you, you've decided to make your life a part of your work and your work a part of a life. And those are great sort of thought-provoking things to think about. How do we do that as well? But as you go into that and think about it, you, from a corporate standpoint, had to allow discussions about faith go on in Dell. Tell me how you facilitated that in your work there.
I had an individual that actually came to me, and she had an idea of starting a Christian employee resource group. And I said, I think that's a great idea. And she said to me, by the way, they're meeting and praying in these conference rooms across Dell. You may not know it, but they are. And they would do it every day. At that time, I went to our head of HR and said, I think we should start a Christian employee resource group, and he didn't like the idea.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
And he was Christian.
Yeah, but it's scary, isn't it?
It was scary. And the reason why he didn't like it is we had gone through a difficult time with the Muslim community about 2 years prior to that, and he just felt like this was a bit of a lightning rod to do that. So I kind of agreed, and I said, well, they're going to keep meeting, and they're going to keep praying, and they're going to keep doing all that other kind of stuff. And then about 2 years later, through part of the reorganization that had happened at Dell, I inherited our diversity, equity, and inclusion organization. And I said, well, now is a good time, better than any time, to start a interfaith employee resource group. And that was right around the time where you had George Floyd, you had Me Too, right. You had the shootings that were happening in Jewish synagogues, you had some of these uprisings that were happening across some Christian communities. And I went to Michael and I said, we should start an interfaith ERG. He said, tell me more. I said,
So ERG.
Employee Resource Group.
Okay.
So
All right.
Women's Employee Resource Group,
Got it.
Interfaith,
With ya.
kind of lots of different ones. And he said, tell me more. And I said, Michael, there is such an opportunity to educate like-minded spiritual leaders and bring them together in a safe place where they can educate each other around their beliefs, which when we did that, by the way, you realize 80% of their beliefs are all pretty common. It's the final kind of 20%, final mile type of thing. But more importantly, it was a place where we could bring spiritual leaders together. They helped with their sense of belonging in the company and the culture, and a place where they could just learn more about, each other's beliefs, celebrate different cultures, different practices, those types of things. So he said, okay. And I remember walking out the door and he said to me, one of the things I've realized over the years, faith is a really powerful thing. I said, yeah. And to this day, it is, at least a year ago when I checked, it was the largest employee resource group that Dell had, the fastest growing, and has single-handedly been an enabler to employees to have, again, these safe conversations where they don't have to check their spiritual beliefs at the door when they show up at work.
Yeah. Wow. So it's very holistic, just in bringing them in. Tony?
I just want to finish that off and finish her sentence by saying that during that period of time, some of the results of the efforts that she was pushing through, because I was consulting for Dell, we go take a trip to Dell in Nashville, and we have a lot of Muslim employees there. And some of the biggest, table topics that were thrown out there in the town hall was that they're not happy that the Muslims were washing their feet on the sink. So, because at 5 p.m., they do worship and say their little prayer. So as a result of some of that effort, that interfaith group, they lowered 6 sinks down to the ground so people can do it properly. And that was amazing. That was the beginning of change. And that day, I honestly believe that the culture of Dell began.
Yeah. Shaping the old culture.
Yes.
Yeah, 100,000 employees, that's phenomenal to think about. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We just have a little bit more time, and we have so many things we could talk about. We could talk about the cross-cultural nature of your marriage. We haven't spent any time talking about that. Is there anything particular about that many of the folks who are here have to negotiate in terms of cross-cultural marriages and other things like that you find particularly important?
Never marry for a green card.
There's your advice right there.
Yes. You can now buy a gold card, however.
Yeah, so you got $5
Just
million
need $5
will
million.
get you that gold card. Yeah.
By the way, he was a U.S. citizen when we met.
Just to clarify.
Just to clarify. And notwithstanding the fact that that was one of the 3 questions that my father asked him.
Oh, wow.
What was your
Yeah.
intent? And do you need a green card?
Did
And
he
he
really?
said,
Yeah.
no, Mr. Hughes, I'm actually a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And how much money do you have in the bank?
Yeah, that was the 3rd question. Yeah. And so, Faith, we've talked about how it shapes work. How did it shape your family? Just your raising of kids?
we've always raised our children, certainly in a church environment, going to church, volunteering at church, all of that. We've raised our kids to really believe that hard work matters. And where hard work meets purpose, AKA grit, is really where you can really, really unlock their full potential. We've raised our kids that they have to be responsibility and accountability go hand in hand.
Same Jesus principles you took into work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you screw up, you're going to have to pay the price. And our kids have screwed up. all three of them,
Yeah, we won't go into that.
at varying points in their lives and those types of things. But then I think the fourth principle is just we're always there for them.
Yeah.
And they love each other, and they love our best memories are around the kitchen counter and just cooking and drinking wine and making fun of each other and just being there for them. And family is a very, very big part of how I was raised, Tony was raised, and will be the legacy that we leave our children.
So my goal and my hope is for those who are listening that their lives will be lived holistically in this way, that we really take the things that are a part of faith, make them a part of the principles that we take into work, into family, into marriage, into friendship, into all those kind of things. We're so thankful that you took the time to share with us the advice that you've given. Inherent in the answers have been really, really profound, and I'm very, very thankful. Can we give them a hand as we sing?